Yo guys, what is going on? It is Invin here, and today what I am bringing to you guys is my initial thoughts and feelings and kind of a almost like day one summary of the Tempest Heart brand new expedition, which is of course out right now on the PTR from the March update, or the Heart of Madness update, which is the next content update we are going to see towards the end of March here on New World. Now, this is going to contain as little spoilers as possible verbally, but I am going to be playing some gameplay background. It is only going to be the first 10 to 12 minutes, however long this video ends up being. So if you don't want to see any gameplay at all, probably just listen. I'm going to try and keep the spoilers to a minimum. If you don't mind seeing the first little bit or any at all, then of course do feel free to obviously watch along as well. Now I'm going to talk about what I think about the dungeon overall, of whether the expedition is good, whether it's difficult, and kind of my thoughts and feelings having used the blunderbuss in it, all that sort of stuff as well, because of course that is the brand new weapon coming out with the March update. Now before we fully jump into today's video, if you haven't already done so, please do drop me a subscribe down below, as it really does help to support me and my content here on the channel. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So the first thing that I want to cover then is the overall feel of the expedition, and honestly is probably my favorite one so far. The whole environment that it's set in, the way that the gameplay works, I would say probably it's the longest one so far by quite a fair shot. I don't want to spoil too much of it, like I said, but there's quite a lot to do in this dungeon. But what I do like is the introduction of the mechanics from other expeditions that we've had throughout New World, as well as some of the other features from around the game that you can find in various different locations. Again, trying to keep these spoilers to a minimum, but using different mechanisms and different sort of puzzle type things in there, as well as the mechanics of the actual bosses themselves, is really, really cool. The setting is, of course, corrupted. You know that from the Heart of Madness update, and the fact that we are going to be carrying on the main story to get to this point, and obviously with it being Isabella as kind of the main boss, that's the whole premise of this expedition. It's a very, very cool one, and I would say the final boss fight itself, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what or how it works, but it is very, very cool. It's difficult, don't get me wrong, this is a very difficult expedition, but it has proved to be a lot of fun so far, and I actually think it's one of the coolest ones in terms of like the animations and the way that the gameplay works, the mechanisms of that boss. So yeah, it is a very interesting expedition, and certainly very different to ones we've seen before. I would say in terms of the mechanics of the bosses and the way that it plays out, it's got similarities to several different expeditions, but I would say Dynasty kind of feels the most similar with the final boss in Dynasty, the way that she moves and almost does the dance related stuff. This one is more chaos related and of course corrupted related, but it is very, very cool and quite unique to anything that we've seen in the game so far, which I actually think is a really, really big positive. Now, overall, the difficulty of this, well, I would probably say it's that by far the hardest endgame expedition. In terms of length, is by far the longest, but in terms of the actual boss fights, I would say the mechanics have had a step up, let's say, from some of the others. There's more multiple mechanics to look out for, if you like. So instead of focusing on one or two abilities, some of these bosses have 3 or 4, and the ones that do have 1 or 2 are just as challenging as the ones we've seen in previous expeditions, such as Garden of Genesis and Lazarus Instrumentality. So particularly looking at things like Scylla from Lazarus, that sort of level of difficulty for these mobs. So yeah, it is a pretty challenging one, but it is something, like I said there, that's actually proved to be quite a lot of fun. It takes a bit of getting used to. It's not something you can just walk through, at least on the PTR, because we have been given 585 gear, so that should be noted as you see in the gameplay as well. The actual team composition and the way that things are playing out in the background is with 585 gear that you get given by default, so the perks are not necessarily great as well, but it is, you know, it is fun, it is good, and I've been enjoying trying to learn how it works. Obviously only managed to play it a couple of times so far because it's just literally been released yesterday evening, but it has been a great experience, and I think that's what expeditions should be. Trial and error, how to do it well, and of course then, you know, learning the mechanics of the boss fight. Similarly to, you know, other games where boss fights are much more mechanical based, this expedition is edging on the end of that, which I'm really enjoying. Now, like I said, touching on the setting, it's corrupted, it's chaos-based, there's varying cool environments as you go through this, which honestly is amazing. The art team have done a phenomenal job on this. You're going to see different floating objects, you're going to see different bursts of colours, you're going to see the crazy, crazy chaos dimension when you go in there. There's stuff flying around everywhere, and again, without too many spoilers, it is amazing. And there's all the different art styles that go into the boss fights themselves as well, which have been really cool, as well as the arenas for those boss fights, where there's some with candles, like floating candle type stuff. There's some that have just like got the broken parts of Myrkgard in, as well as other bits of villages and such. And it is an amazing experience. It feels like a whole story going throughout this expedition, which is something that with the other ones we've seen, this one just feels like on a much larger scale. So whether that's because it physically is larger, which I would say it is, but also just the way that the progression of the expedition works, it feels like a story going through it, almost step by step to see what comes next, taking into account the lore that you get from this as well, the notes that you can find around there, as well as the slightly narrated story that you get through Isabella's perspective, which is a very, very cool addition. Again, something we've seen previously in Expeditions somewhat, but this time it feels like they're really taking you through an immersive story as you progress through sections of this map, and that is something which I've really enjoyed. It might not be for everybody, not everybody is as fond of the lore and stuff, but if you do of course use the pages and the lore pages that you find throughout this as well to kind of piece together the story, when you interact with different characters that are going to be in there, obviously we know from before with the dev update video that the heretic makes an appearance and he is actually in the expedition. Again, I won't spoil what that is, but it's a really cool experience if you are reading the lore pages to see how this all pieces together as a story, and it's a very, very exciting expedition for that basis, if nothing else as well as of course the mechanics being fun. Now specifically on the blunderbuss, as you can see I'm using it in today's gameplay. This has been a lot of fun to try out in multiple different situations. I've tried it in duels with some friends, I've also tried it of course here in the expedition with PvE, and I would say that the weapon is very decent. Bear in mind I'm playing on ping because the only PTR server available is in US East, so I've got about 160 to 180 ping consistently, and as you'll see I am pinging across the map there due to that, but overall it was a lot of fun to use. It's been quite a consistently high damage weapon, although as you can see, my HP is pretty low in there. I was only running about 100 constitution, I think, which realistically is not too viable. That was with a light set as well to try and pump as much damage as I could while still surviving. But I think realistically you'd want to be, even if you're going to be in a light set, at 150 to 200 con, especially in wars, in Outpost Rush, that sort of PvP environment. However, you can burst people down very, very quickly if you sacrifice some HP for those, higher stats in the damage outputs. That being said, if you're going to run something like a medium or heavy bruiser that roughly sits around 150 to 250 con, somewhere in that region, and the rest going into strength, I think this is going to be a highly valuable component to be able to switch to, and that's proved to be the case in the dungeon, as unfortunately it's not in this gameplay, but it's something I switched to later on, and it was a really good secondary to use whilst going around that. So specifically how it works in this expedition, I think it's great versus the bosses. I do think that it's got a lot of potential to, of course, help out your team in multiple different ways, particularly the blast shot that leaves behind the speed. Obviously that knocks down enemies and rends them, which is really, really good for boss fights. 20% rend for 6 seconds is crucial and can really help out when paired with some other abilities as well. Makes your DPS guys be able to help a lot more. And now with this as well, obviously it knocks them down and it gives you that path of speed, where it means if you've got someone that's, for example, a mage with a fire staff and void gauntlet, they can swip to blade if they have it, run forward with that speed boost, get a few hits in and pull back out, whilst being relatively safe for around about 8 seconds there, which is pretty big. And of course, especially in those timed runs for mutations, not necessarily on the Tempest Heart expedition here, but of course on some of the previous ones that we've got, this could be crucial for those mutators. Now, I know something that a lot of people are going to ask about is, are mutations out with this expedition? And currently at the time of the PTR, no, they are not. Now, what I would say on this front is I think it'd be very, very cool to see mutated expedition variant of this new Myrkgard expedition, but what we've got to know about Isabella's Lair is that it's actually a pretty tough one. Like, once you go through this, obviously, like I said, 585 gear score, so it's right on the cusp of just being above what you need as the recommended level. So most players that are at 600 to 625 are going to find this fairly easy in vanilla mode, if you like. But it is a lot longer, I would say substantially longer than some of the others, particularly Genesis and Lazarus, even Dynasty. The difficulty is on par, if not above, but that length is going to be meaning that you're going to need a lot more of a time frame. So maybe they would extend the limit for the gold timer or silver timer, etc. But I do think that that is going to be something they could do very nicely. It would work well as a mutated expedition, and it would be fun to try and plan out those speed routes, how you can group the mobs together in certain areas, that sort of thing, which parts you can skip. There is a lot of bosses in it though, again, without spoiling it too much, there is more bosses than the other dungeons and the other expeditions, so again, that would have to be factored in, and yeah, I think it could work, but it would need to be adapted, or the rule set would need to be adapted for this mutated variant, but I think it would be very, very cool. And as I say, it's probably my favourite experience in an expedition in terms of like the story it tells and the way it plays out. So yeah, it could be, would be personally something I would like to see mutated, but they would have to look at the rule set for how that would actually come into play to make it on par with the other ones, or maybe increase the rewards of it, etc., or increase the amount of time you're allowed to be in there for, or something along those lines, so that you could make it more fair and more on par with the results of the other ones, because otherwise they would be much quicker to run and result in higher yields of the Umbral Shards. So overall, my opinion on the brand new expedition is, yes, it is very, very fun. Yes, it is tricky and challenging, particularly at the gear score they give you in the PTR, and probably anywhere up to 600 gear score you're going to be finding it pretty tricky. Once you get to 600, 610, 625, etc., it's going to probably be fairly easy if you've got a competent group. Again, you will be able to do this in the 550 to 600 gear score range as well if you've got a group who's communicating and knows the tactics of each of the bosses within, because it will be, again, something with trial and error that you can work out and be fairly competent in. But obviously when you get up to those higher gear scores, it's going to be much easier. As of the time of making this video, right now, the first couple of days of this PTR, there is no mutated variant. However, I will bring you an updated version of this video should one be released. I'll kind of cover that, my thoughts on it, how it works, etc., and if they've updated the rule set alongside it. So stay tuned for that in case we do get it, but as of right now, nothing official. It is fun. Like I said, the environment that it's in is really cool. I really like the artistic direction, how the chaos works its way into, obviously, the corrupted zones and stuff, whilst we're getting some flashbacks to areas you may have been before in Eternum, which is very, very cool, and that is something that we've not seen in other expeditions that I really liked as an additional touch in this one. Of course, using the new weapon, and it was a lot of fun, but I think viability-wise, you're going to have to build a proper composition to run this quickly. But overall, yeah, potentially my favourite ever expedition in New World, which is quite a bold statement because I do like the other ones, and expeditions are kind of my thing. But yeah, this is a very, very fun one. So I'll let you guys obviously play it out and try it out for yourselves, either in the PTR or when this comes out. That's why I've tried to reduce the amount of spoilers as much as possible throughout this video, but hopefully it does get you a feel for it. Overall, very good, would be my opinion, and I'm excited to see what they do going forward with expeditions off the back of this brand new one being released. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. That's just my initial thoughts and feelings. If you have managed to play it, do let me know down below in the comments what your initial thoughts and feelings are as well. Do you like it? Is it a good one? Do you think it would work as mutated expeditions, etc.? All of that good stuff would be amazing. Other than that, guys, make sure you do drop me a like and subscribe down below, as it really does help support me and my content. And that is going to be it for today. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you again very, very shortly with a brand new upload. Take care, guys, and peace.